I had been searching for peace for months before I found the house. After 15 years in military intelligence and 5 more as a civilian contractor, I craved the quiet. No more sterile government facilities. No more windowless rooms. Just me, a modest home in an upscale neighborhood called Oak Ridge Estates, and enough distance from my classified work to breathe. The realtor had mentioned something about a homeowners association, but I barely registered it. After dealing with military bureaucracy, how bad could a neighborhood committee be? The house itself was perfect. Single-story, detached, with a spacious backyard that faced a natural preserve. The previous owners had maintained it immaculately, and the mature oak trees provided privacy from neighboring properties. Most importantly, it had the right infrastructure for my remote work needs. I closed on the property in early spring, and within a week my essential belongings were moved in, including my specialized communication equipment. I was unpacking boxes in the garage when I first met her. A sharp knock on the door frame made me turn around. She stood there, perfectly coiffed blonde hair cut in that distinctive ask-for-the-manager style, wearing pressed khakis and a pink cardigan despite the warm weather. "Hello there, I am Karen Westfield, president of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association." She extended her hand. Her grip was tight, her smile did not reach her eyes. "James Cooper, nice to meet you." I noticed she was already scanning my garage, eyes lingering on the stacked boxes. "I wanted to personally welcome you to our community and deliver these." She handed me a thick binder. "Our community guidelines. We are quite strict about maintaining property values and community standards here." I flipped through the binder. It was at least 100 pages of rules, regulations, and bylaws. "That seems comprehensive," I said neutrally. "Very. We find that clear boundaries make good neighbors." Her voice had an edge to it. "I notice you have satellite equipment. Any installation requires prior HOA approval, you know." "It is for work, government contract." "Government or not, rules are rules. You will need to submit a formal request." She produced a business card from her pocket. "My contact information. I am the final approver on all external modifications." As she walked away, I noticed other neighbors watching from their windows or yards. A man across the street quickly looked away when I caught his eye. A woman walking her dog deliberately crossed to the other side of the street when she saw Karen. That evening, my next-door neighbor, Bill, came over with a bottle of wine. "Saw you met the warden," he said with a grimace. "The HOA president? Yeah, she seems intense." Bill laughed without humor. "That is putting it mildly. Karen has been president for 6 years running. Nobody dares run against her anymore." "Why not?" I asked, accepting the wine. "Because she makes life hell for anyone who challenges her. Perfect lawn citations, parking violations, decoration disapprovals. The woman keeps a file on everyone. Trust me, keep your head down, follow her rules, and you will be fine." I thanked him for the warning, but I was not particularly worried. I had dealt with far more intimidating people in my career. My plan was simple: do my job, keep to myself, enjoy my new home. Over the next few days, I focused on setting up my home office. My work required a specialized uplink, a direct, encrypted connection that allowed me to access secure government networks. It was completely legal, properly documented, and technically outside HOA jurisdiction, since it involved national security protocols. I had the proper permits from both the federal government and the local municipality. The installation was discreet, a reinforced cable running from a specialized satellite dish to my home office. Nothing garish or obtrusive. The technicians were in and out in a day, leaving no mess behind. I tested the system, confirmed the connection was secure, and reported to my supervisor that I was operational. That should have been the end of it, but 3 days later I found a violation notice taped to my front door. Unauthorized external equipment installation. Fine, $250, removal required within 48 hours. And so began my introduction to life under Karen's watch. I knew immediately that a confrontation was inevitable. The notice on my door was just the opening salvo in what would clearly become a prolonged battle. Still, I tried diplomacy first. I called the number on Karen's business card and explained my situation, that the equipment was essential for my federally contracted work, was installed with proper permits, and did not violate any municipal codes. "Mr. Cooper," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "I do not care if you have permission from the president himself. In Oak Ridge Estates, external installations require HOA approval, period. I have documentation from the Department of Defense. Submit it through the proper channels then. Fill out Form 27B, attach your permits, and the committee will review it at next month's meeting." Next month, this is time-sensitive government work. Then you should have thought about that before installing unauthorized equipment, should you not? The smugness in her voice was unmistakable. "The fine stands. Good day." She hung up before I could respond. I stood in my kitchen, phone in hand, disbelief slowly turning to frustration. This was absurd. I had faced down military commanders, foreign officials, and intelligence adversaries, yet somehow this suburban dictator had managed to get under my skin in record time. The next day, another notice appeared in my mailbox. This one cited my garbage bins being visible from the street on trash day. The day after that, a warning about the height of my lawn grass, which was, at most, a quarter-inch above the approved length. Each notice carried Karen's signature, the K ending in a flourish that seemed almost triumphant. I began noticing other things, too. When I walked through the neighborhood, certain residents would nod politely but quickly look away. Others would cross the street entirely. Bill from next door stopped coming by. When I caught him outside one evening, he looked nervous. "Sorry I have not been neighborly lately," he said, eyes darting toward Karen's house down the street. "She saw me bringing wine over that first night, got a citation for an unapproved garden hose color the next day." "You cannot be serious," I said. "Dead serious. Listen, she has targeted you now. Most people just cave, pay the fines, and get in line." I thanked him for the information and went inside to think. That night, as I was reviewing some encrypted communications for work, I noticed movement outside my window. I peered through the blinds to see Karen standing at the edge of my property, photographing my satellite dish with her phone. When she noticed me watching, she did not even pretend to be embarrassed. She simply pointed at the dish, made a cutting motion with her hand, and walked away. The next morning, I found her inspecting my mailbox. "Can I help you with something?" I asked, deliberately keeping my voice calm. "Your mailbox is 2 inches taller than regulation height," she said without looking at me. "It is the standard box that came with the house. Previous owners had a variance. You did not apply to maintain that variance." I took a deep breath. "Karen, what is this really about? Is this because of my satellite equipment?" Finally, she turned to face me. "This community has standards, Mr. Cooper. If we let one person break the rules, soon everyone thinks they can do whatever they want. I will not allow that. The equipment is legal, it is secure, it is necessary for national defense work." She scoffed. "Oh, please, national defense, from a suburban house. Do not insult my intelligence with your excuses." She walked away then, clipboard in hand, back straight as a ruler. I stood by my mailbox, suddenly understanding that reason and diplomacy would get me nowhere. This was about power, pure and simple. That evening, I began documenting everything. I installed additional security cameras around my property. I started a detailed log of every interaction, every citation, every incident. I filed the HOA paperwork as requested, including my federal permits and security clearance documentation. I even reached out to my supervisor to give him a heads up that a civilian was taking unusual interest in my communications setup. What I did not know then was that Karen was already planning her next move, one that would escalate this petty neighborhood dispute into something far more serious than either of us anticipated. 2 weeks later, I had to travel to Washington for an in-person security briefing. It was only an overnight trip, but I was apprehensive about leaving my property unattended given the mounting tensions with Karen. Still, duty called. I double-checked all my security cameras, activated the alarm system, and headed to the airport. The meeting in Washington went longer than expected. We were discussing a new encryption protocol that would be implemented through my home terminal, allowing for enhanced security on certain classified communications. My role was to monitor the initial deployment and report any anomalies. It was routine but important work, the kind that happens every day without the public ever knowing, keeping government communications secure from foreign intelligence. We will start the new protocol implementation tomorrow at 900 your local time, my supervisor explained. Make sure your uplink is operational. The Pentagon will be connecting directly through your node for the initial handshake. I nodded, making notes about the technical specifications. I will be ready. My flight home was delayed that night, so I did not arrive back until almost midnight. Exhausted, I dropped my bags inside the door and went straight to bed, planning to check my equipment in the morning before the scheduled protocol deployment. When my alarm went off at 7, I made coffee and headed to my office. The moment I entered the room, I knew something was wrong. The status lights on my uplink terminal were blinking red instead of the steady green they should have been showing. I immediately ran a diagnostic, but the system could not establish a connection. "What the hell?" I muttered, checking the physical connections. Everything seemed intact inside the house. I followed the cable to the exterior wall where it connected to the outside line. That is when I found it. The reinforced cable had been cleanly cut about 2 feet from where it entered the house. Not accidentally damaged, not weather-worn, deliberately severed with what must have been heavy-duty wire cutters. My blood ran cold. This was not just property damage, this was potentially a federal offense. The equipment was clearly marked with government security notifications. Tampering with it was explicitly prohibited by law. I pulled out my phone and checked the security camera footage from the previous day. At 2:17 p.m., a contractor's van had pulled into my driveway. Karen emerged from her car across the street, pointed the workers toward my backyard, and supervised as they located and cut the cable. The whole operation took less than 10 minutes. Before leaving, Karen had approached my front door and taped something to it. I went back outside and found her note still attached to the door, missed in my late-night exhaustion. Your unauthorized internet equipment has been removed as per HOA Bylaws Section 14.3. The $500 removal fee will be added to your account. You are welcome. Karen Westfield, HOA President. My phone rang. It was my supervisor. "Cooper, we cannot establish the connection. What is going on there?" "Sir, someone cut the line. The HOA president hired contractors to sever the uplink cable." There was a moment of silence on the other end. "Cooper, are you telling me a civilian deliberately cut a secured DoD communication line?" "Yes, sir, I have it on video." Another pause. "Stay put, do not touch anything. A response team is on the way." I hung up and stared at the severed cable in my hands. This was no longer about property values or neighborhood aesthetics. Karen had just interfered with national security infrastructure, and she had no idea what she had just done. As I waited for the response team, I noticed Karen watching from her front porch, that same smug smile on her face. She thought she had won. She thought this was the end of our little power struggle. She was wrong. This was just the beginning. It took exactly 47 minutes for the first black SUV to arrive in front of my house. 3 more followed in quick succession. Men and women in suits emerged, some with FBI jackets, others in plain clothes, but with the unmistakable bearing of federal agents. Their arrival transformed our quiet suburban street into something out of a thriller movie. Curtains twitched in every house as neighbors tried to discreetly observe the commotion. I met the lead agent at my front door, a stern-faced woman who introduced herself as Special Agent Ramirez from the FBI Cyber Division. "Mr. Cooper, I understand your secure line was compromised," she said, skipping pleasantries. "Yes, this way, please." I led her and her team to the backyard and showed them the severed cable. "I have video footage of the incident." We returned to my home office, where I played the security footage on my computer. Agent Ramirez watched with a deepening frown as Karen directed the contractors to cut the cable. "How did she gain access to your backyard?" she asked. "There is a gate, but it was locked. They came through the side yard." So trespassing as well, she noted, making notes on her tablet. And you have documentation that this line was properly marked as government property. I pulled out my installation paperwork, showing the security notifications that had been posted at every connection point. As we were reviewing the documents, a commotion erupted outside. I looked out the window to see Karen marching toward my house, face flushed with indignation. Two agents moved to intercept her, but she pushed past them. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded loudly. "Why are there government vehicles all over our street? This is a violation of community parking ordinances." Agent Ramirez stepped onto my front porch, her badge held out. "Ma'am, I am Special Agent Ramirez with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Who are you?" Karen drew herself up importantly. "I am Karen Westfield, president of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association, and whoever parked those vehicles is in violation of Section 22.7 of our bylaws, which clearly states." "Ma'am," Agent Ramirez interrupted, "we are conducting a federal investigation into the tampering of secure government communications equipment. Are you Karen Westfield who authorized the cutting of a cable on this property yesterday?" Karen's expression flickered between confusion and defiance. "I authorized the removal of unauthorized external equipment, as is my right as HOA president." "May I see your authorization paperwork, please?" "I do not need paperwork. The HOA bylaws give me full authority to remove violations." Agent Ramirez's voice cooled noticeably. "Ma'am, the cable you ordered cut was a secure Department of Defense communication line, clearly marked with federal security notifications. Tampering with it is a federal offense under the Communications Protection Act." For the first time since I had met her, Karen looked uncertain. "That is ridiculous. It was just an internet cable." "No, ma'am, it was not. It was a direct encrypted uplink to Pentagon systems, and your actions caused a security breach that triggered a federal response protocol." Karen's eyes darted to the other agents, who were now photographing the cut cable and taking measurements. Some neighbors had ventured outside, watching from a distance with wide eyes. "This is absurd," Karen sputtered. "I was enforcing HOA rules. If anything, he is the one in violation." She pointed at me accusingly. Agent Ramirez remained professionally detached. "Mr. Cooper has all the necessary federal permits and local authorizations for his equipment. We have verified this already. Now, I need you to come with me to answer some questions about your actions yesterday." "Am I being arrested?" Karen's voice rose sharply. "Not at this time. We are conducting an investigation. But I should advise you that willful tampering with federal communications infrastructure can carry penalties of up to 10 years in federal prison and fines of up to $250,000. The color drained from Karen's face. For the first time, I saw fear replace the arrogance in her eyes. As Agent Ramirez led her to one of the vehicles, neighbors watched in stunned silence. I caught Bill's eye across the street. He gave me a subtle thumbs up. The investigation continued throughout the day. Technicians arrived to repair the severed connection. Agents interviewed neighbors, documented evidence, and took formal statements. Karen was released after several hours of questioning, but was issued a formal notice that she was under investigation for federal crimes. By evening, the government vehicles had departed, but the quiet neighborhood would never be quite the same again. The balance of power had shifted, and everyone knew it. I expected humility or at least a momentary retreat. I was wrong. Karen Westfield did not back down, she doubled down. The morning after the federal agents departed, I found a notice on my door informing me that an emergency HOA meeting had been called to address serious security concerns within the community. The meeting was scheduled for that evening at the community center. I noticed the time stamp showed it had been posted at 6 a.m. Karen had been busy. When I arrived at the meeting, it was immediately clear that something was off. The room was packed with residents, but several people looked away when I entered. Karen stood at the front, composed and authoritative despite the events of the previous day. She waited until I had taken a seat at the back before beginning. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. she said, her voice steady. As many of you witnessed yesterday, our community was invaded by federal agents due to the actions of our newest resident. All eyes turned toward me. Mr. Cooper has installed unauthorized surveillance equipment that has drawn federal attention to our peaceful neighborhood. While he claims this is for government work, yesterday's events demonstrate the danger his activities pose to our community. I stood up immediately. That is completely false. The federal response was because you cut a secure government communication line, not because of my equipment. Karen spoke over me. The HOA board has voted to impose an emergency fine of $5,000 for creating a public safety hazard and bringing unwanted federal scrutiny to Oak Ridge Estates. Furthermore, we are issuing a formal eviction notice for violation of community safety protocols. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some looked shocked, others nodded in agreement. Karen had clearly been lobbying certain residents before the meeting. "This is absurd," I said loudly. "There was no board vote. You are making this up." A man toward the front, one of Karen's loyal supporters on the board, spoke up. "The vote was held this morning in an emergency session, which I was not notified of, making it a violation of your own bylaws," I countered. Karen smiled thinly. "You were notified. The notice was posted on the community bulletin board as required." "At what time?" 6 a.m. "Convenient," I said, "and completely improper notification according to Section 8.2 of your own bylaws, which requires 24 hours written notice to all affected parties." Her smile faltered slightly. I had been reading that binder of rules more carefully than she had anticipated. "The safety of this community comes first," she recovered quickly. "Mr. Cooper is engaged in activities that have brought armed federal agents into our neighborhood. Who knows what danger he is bringing to our doors? Spies, terrorists, foreign agents." The absurdity of her claims might have been comical if some residents were not nodding along. She had clearly spent the day spinning a narrative that cast me as a dangerous element and herself as the community's protective guardian. "I work on secure communication systems for the Department of Defense," I said clearly, addressing the room rather than Karen. "My work helps protect national security. The federal agents came because Karen illegally cut a secure government communication line after trespassing on my property. She committed a federal crime, not me." One brave resident raised his hand. "Is that true, Karen? Did you cut his cable?" "I authorized the removal of unauthorized equipment, as is my duty as HOA president," she replied smoothly. "If he had gone through proper channels, none of this would have happened." "I submitted all the proper paperwork weeks ago," I said. "You never reviewed it." "It was incomplete," she snapped. I had had enough. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am sorry you have been dragged into this. The truth is simple. I have all legal permits for my equipment. Karen chose to trespass and destroy federal property. There is an ongoing federal investigation, and I have also retained an attorney to pursue civil damages. This meeting and these fines are not valid under your own HOA rules." I walked out, leaving stunned silence behind me. Later that evening, my doorbell rang. It was Bill and 3 other neighbors. "We wanted you to know we are on your side," Bill said quietly. "Karen has been a tyrant for years, but this is beyond anything she has done before. She has convinced some people you are running some kind of spy operation," another neighbor added. "But many of us know better." "What can we do?" I asked. "We are spreading the word about what really happened, and we will vote against her at the next HOA election." I thanked them for their support. It meant more than I expected to know I was not alone in this fight. The next day, posts began appearing on the neighborhood app. Karen had shared her version of events, painting herself as a defender of community values against dangerous outside influence. Some residents supported her narrative, but cracks were forming. More people were asking questions, demanding evidence, challenging her authority. The battle lines were drawn. Karen had her loyalists, those who benefited from her favor or feared her retribution. But her power was built on intimidation, and that foundation was beginning to crumble. My lawyer filed papers for a civil suit against both Karen personally and the HOA for property damage, trespassing, defamation, and harassment. The federal investigation continued in parallel, with agents interviewing more neighbors and collecting additional evidence. The community was divided, but the truth was slowly winning out. And Karen, for all her bluster, was fighting a losing battle against forces far larger than her clipboard and bylaws. 3 months later, we faced each other across a courtroom. My civil case against Karen and the HOA had reached its day in court, and the room was packed with Oak Ridge Estates residents. Some came to support me, others to stand with Karen, and many simply to witness the culmination of the neighborhood drama that had consumed our community for months. Karen sat at the defendant's table with the HOA's attorney, a nervous-looking man who kept adjusting his tie. She maintained her regal posture, chin lifted, eyes forward, but the strain of the past months showed in the tightness around her mouth and the new lines on her forehead. My attorney, Sofia Martinez, was calm and prepared. We had compiled an exhaustive record of Karen's harassment, not just against me, but patterns extending back years against other residents. Former HOA board members had come forward with stories of intimidation. Records showed selective enforcement of rules against residents who challenged her authority. Judge Harrison Caldwell, a no-nonsense man in his 60s, called the court to order. "Before we begin," he said, reviewing the papers before him, "I want to clarify that while there is a separate federal investigation ongoing regarding the tampering with government property, this civil case will focus solely on the claims of property damage, trespassing, defamation, and harassment. Is that understood?" Both attorneys nodded. As the plaintiff, my side presented first. Sophia laid out a methodical case, beginning with my move to the neighborhood and progressing through the escalating pattern of harassment. "Your Honor," she said, "we will demonstrate that Ms. Westfield engaged in a calculated campaign to target my client from the moment he moved in, culminating in her unauthorized entry onto his property and destruction of his property." She presented the security footage of Karen directing the cable cutting, the violation notices with inconsistent enforcement compared to other residents, and testimony from neighbors who had witnessed her photographing my property at odd hours. When Karen's attorney cross-examined me, he tried to paint me as secretive and uncooperative. "Mr. Cooper, why did you not simply comply with HOA regulations regarding external equipment?" "I did comply," I responded calmly. "I submitted all required paperwork on April 3rd, which was never processed. I have the receipt signed by Ms. Westfield herself." We presented the receipt, undermining their narrative of my noncompliance. When it was Karen's turn to testify, her composure began to crack under Sophia's precise questioning. "Ms. Westfield, did you enter Mr. Cooper's property on May 17th? "I supervised contractors performing HOA-authorized removal of non-compliant equipment." "Did you have written authorization from the full board for this action?" "As president, I have emergency authority." "Please answer the question. Did you have written authorization as required by your own bylaws, Section 17.4? Karen hesitated. "No." "And did you see the federal security notifications posted on the equipment before cutting it?" "Those were added after the fact," Karen insisted. Sophia approached with a document. "Your Honor, this is the installation record showing security notifications were placed on April 1st with photographic evidence. Ms. Westfield cut the cable on May 17th. As the questioning continued, Karen became increasingly defensive. When Sophia presented evidence that Karen had called an invalid emergency board meeting without proper notice, she interrupted. The community was in danger. I was protecting our neighborhood from unknown government activities. Judge Caldwell looked over his glasses at her. "Ms. Westfield, you will refrain from outbursts and answer only the questions asked." "But, Your Honor, you do not understand what it takes to maintain a prestigious community." "Ms. Westfield," the judge said firmly, "one more interruption and I will hold you in contempt. Is that clear?" The testimony continued with former board members describing how Karen had manipulated HOA rules for years, targeting residents who opposed her, and showing favoritism to allies. Financial records revealed questionable allocation of HOA funds for projects that primarily benefited properties near her home. By the time closing arguments concluded, Karen's carefully constructed image had crumbled. Judge Caldwell took only a brief recess before returning with his ruling. In the matter of Cooper versus Westfield and the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association, this court finds for the plaintiff. He adjusted his glasses. The evidence clearly demonstrates that Ms. Westfield engaged in a pattern of harassment, abused her authority, trespassed on the plaintiff's property, and willfully damaged his property. He ordered Karen to pay $25,000 in damages, plus all legal fees. The HOA was ordered to pay an additional $15,000 and to implement reforms in its governance structure, including term limits for board positions and independent oversight of rule enforcement. Furthermore, the judge added, this court orders Ms. Westfield to cease all contact with Mr. Cooper except through legal representatives. Any violation will result in additional penalties. As we left the courtroom, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Karen pushed past reporters without comment, her face rigid with contained fury. The battle was won, but I knew the war for the soul of our community was not yet over. The fallout from the court case was swift and decisive. Within a week, a petition circulated calling for an emergency HOA election. Karen fought it, citing bylaws that allowed only annual elections, but the tide had turned against her. With the threat of a mass resignation of board members looming, which would legally force an election, she reluctantly agreed. The election was scheduled for the first Saturday in September. In the weeks leading up to it, the neighborhood transformed. People who had been afraid to speak to each other openly now gathered on front lawns and at the community pool, sharing stories of past grievances and planning for a new future. 3 candidates stepped forward to challenge Karen for the presidency. To everyone's surprise, Bill, my formerly cautious neighbor, was among them. His campaign was simple: transparency, fairness, and community over rules. Karen launched an aggressive campaign to maintain her position. She sent daily emails warning of property value collapse if the strict standards she had established were abandoned. She posted flyers claiming her opponents had secret agendas that would destroy the community's prestige. When those tactics failed to gain traction, she began making personal visits to longtime residents, reminding them of favors granted and implying that such consideration might end under new leadership. But the community had awakened. The court testimony had revealed too much: the selective enforcement, the financial irregularities, the years of intimidation. Even some of her staunchest supporters began to distance themselves. The day of the election arrived bright and clear. Turnout was unprecedented. Over 90% of eligible households cast votes. Karen arrived dressed immaculately, her smile brittle but determined. She nodded curtly in my direction but said nothing. The counting was done publicly, with representatives from each candidate overseeing the process. When the results were announced, the community center erupted in applause. Bill had won in a landslide, receiving 72% of the votes. Karen received only 18%, with the remaining votes split between the other 2 candidates. Karen did not stay for Bill's acceptance speech. She walked out, back straight, face expressionless. It was the last time many residents would see her in a public setting for months. The changes began immediately. Bill's first act as president was to establish a transparency committee to review all HOA rules and enforcement actions of the past 5 years. The committee's findings led to the reversal of dozens of fines and violation notices. Architectural guidelines were simplified from 78 pages to 12. The approval process for home modifications was streamlined and made objective rather than subjective. 2 weeks after the election, a formal letter arrived from the HOA, signed by Bill. It contained an official apology for the harassment I had experienced and an invitation to join the Transparency Committee given my unique perspective on the importance of fair and consistent rule application. I accepted the position, grateful for the opportunity to help reshape our community's governance. The work was sometimes tedious, but always rewarding as we dismantled the labyrinth of rules Karen had constructed over the years. As for Karen herself, she retreated from community life entirely. Her perfectly manicured lawn began to show signs of neglect. Her curtains remained drawn, packages piled up by her door until neighbors took it upon themselves to move them out of the rain. Rumors circulated that she was planning to sell her house and move away, but months passed with no "for sale" sign appearing. Then on a crisp October morning 6 months after the election, I was outside checking my mail when a car pulled into Karen's driveway. She emerged from her house, suitcases in hand. Our eyes met across the street. For a moment I thought she might ignore me, but then she set down her bags and walked over. "You won," she said simply. No greeting, no preamble. "It was not about winning," I replied. "It was about fairness." She glanced around the neighborhood, taking in the Halloween decorations that would have received violation notices under her regime, the various satellite dishes now openly displayed, the diverse paint colors that somehow had not caused property values to plummet as she had predicted. "I am moving to Arizona," she said. "My sister lives there in a proper gated community with professional management, not amateurs playing at governance." I nodded, unsure what response she wanted. "The federal charges," she said after a pause, "they were dropped. I heard community service and probation instead." Another pause. I still think I was right about the rules. Structure matters. "It does," I agreed, "but so does flexibility and human decency." She seemed about to argue, then appeared to think better of it. "Goodbye, Mr. Cooper." "Goodbye, Karen. I hope you find what you are looking for in Arizona." She returned to her car and drove away. I never saw her again. The "for sale" sign went up the next day. Her house sold quickly to a young family with 2 children and a large dog, all things Karen had subtly discouraged through various HOA policies over the years. As for me, I had my security equipment properly reinstalled, this time with prominent federal security notices that no one would mistake. My connection to the Pentagon remained secure, my work continued, and gradually I found the peace I had been seeking when I first moved to Oak Ridge Estates. Sometimes, on warm evenings, neighbors gather in my backyard for barbecues and games. Bill often jokes about the Karen era, as if it were some distant historical period rather than just a year ago. The newer residents listen to these stories with amused disbelief, unable to imagine the community as it once was. The satellite dish that started it all still sits on my roof, now joined by others throughout the neighborhood. None of them have caused the property values to decline. In fact, our community has become more desirable than ever. It turns out that what people value most is not rigid conformity, but a sense of belonging, of fairness, and of being treated with dignity. Karen never knew it, but when she cut that cable, she did not just sever my connection to the Pentagon. She severed her own connection to power, revealing the fragility of authority built on fear rather than respect. And in doing so, she inadvertently gave our community the freedom to become something better than it had ever been before.